Welcome to Your Key on Orlando Real Estate, a production of the Orlando Regional Realtor Association. I'm Gary Balanoff, and I'll be co-hosting this podcast with another real estate expert and member of our association, Sarah Hawthorne. For today is the question that thousands of people in our area and throughout the nation are asking, and that is, should I buy a home or should I rent? And it's certainly an all-important decision, and we're here to give you the trends, the facts, the information that will lead you to making the right decision for yourself, for your family, for your future. So we'll start by asking, what are the current market conditions that kind of frame those decisions? And we'll start with renting. Sarah?
Thank you so much, Gary. So because I work primarily in corporate international relocation, that is the question that every single one of my clients starts out by asking. When I move here, should I buy or should I rent? And it is an individual decision for each family because as a realtor, it's not my job to tell them to do one thing or the other. It's my job to provide them the information, educate them, and give them resources so they can make their best choice for their decision. So some of the questions that I'll ask them is how long do they plan to live here? Because that can determine, the cost of moving is expensive. The cost of purchasing a home is expensive. Renting is expensive as well. So how the length of their stay. Are they going to be here for 2 years or 5 years or 10 years? Because that can help determine whether or not they should rent or buy. Are their finances in order and ready to purchase? And in that case, I'm going to recommend them to a licensed lender. Make sure that if they are in the mindset of buying at some point, that they are getting the right documents in order, their finances in order, and getting the expert advice to be ready in the future or to see if they're ready now. So that way they can go ahead and purchase if that's what they want to do. Is their lifestyle more compatible with renting versus purchasing? There are some people that they don't want to deal with a broken dishwasher, or they don't want to necessarily mow their lawn. They don't want to keep up with those things that a homeowner normally would care for. They like the idea of the landlord handling the maintenance on their issue. The pride factor, some people want to purchase because they just feel uncomfortable living in somebody else's home. And then there's on the rental side, there's that overwhelming factor of, oh my gosh, I'm responsible for this $100,000, $200,000, $400,000 asset that feels overwhelming for them. So understanding their personality and what will be a good fit for them is how I determine if rental is a good option for them, or give them the information so they can determine if rental will be a good option for them.
Makes sense. I mean, I'm going to take kind of the people who are looking to buy side of it. And we're not against each other in any ways. We're both realtors, and we both handle both the rental and the buying market. But to give people, in podcast land, an idea of how you should start looking at these decisions. Because what I find is a lot of people come to me and they go, well, should I even be in the market for anything? Should I just stay, hunker down, and wait for the next Ukraine to settle out or COVID to completely go away? And I go, life is a constantly changing series of things. So you have to understand what's best for your family. And you mentioned that is oftentimes something that was different 5 years ago from how it is today. And so in many cases, we're dealing with sellers who are thinking, well, I probably couldn't do anything more than what I've got now, but they don't realize exactly how much equity they have in their home. So there are some people who have, who are in the process of owning and have owned for a long time, but you don't care what your house sells for, really, or shouldn't be, until you have to sell it.
Right.
So then it becomes an issue for buyers because that house that you bought in 2000 for $122,000 is now worth $580,000. And while a renter, potential buyer is thinking, well, that's just outrageous. Well, everything went up during that time, and the cost of rent has gone up. Like, for example, we just came out with this statistic last week that said that Orlando metro area saw the second biggest jump of any rental area in the country behind only Fort Lauderdale. Fort Lauderdale went up an average of 29%, Orlando by 27%. And we'll get to something that we've talked about before, is the perceived greed out there by both sellers and landlords, but we'll get to that in a moment. But the idea of buyer, should you be even able to get anything now, there are a couple of factors that, despite interest rate increases, they've actually come down a little bit in the last couple of weeks to a little bit more temperate range, because now I think we're seeing a flattening of interest rates. Instead of these 0.75% jump in Fed rate does not necessarily equate to 0.75% increase in the 30-year interest rate.
Right.
So that's part of it. And part of it is we are starting to see a little bit more inventory coming on the market, and that's caused by a number of things, but people seeing maybe I can get something that will be better for my family or better for myself. There are a lot of situations out there where we're dealing with downsizing seniors who have had the same house for 30 years. They've long ago paid it off, and now they're looking at, okay, I don't need a 3,500 square foot mansion now. I want 1,200, 1,500 square feet. What can we get for that? And so the counseling that your Orlando Realtor, whether it be either of us or somebody else, is going to tell you is, we will find you something, and we're finding a few more homes in a few more areas that will be available to people, but you still have to act quickly, I would say. It's not a matter of you can sit on it for a week or two, and if it's a good property, the chances are somebody else is going to be interested too. I've had the conversation with people, well, how come you didn't tell me that it was sold? Well, it only sold this morning, and I can't hog tie all 1,000 people who are looking in that particular area and keep them from buying your house, because it's not your house until you actually buy it. So if you see something that you really like and you feel like would be good and it checks all the boxes, you better act. You still better act and make a reasonable offer. But the other thing on the buying end of it is we're starting to see some price reductions, and we're starting to see some offers that are being accepted at less than full price for really the first time in about 3 years. So buyers, there are some good sides to what's going on out there in the real world. But I will ask you, the landlord greed or seller greed, talk a little bit about what's also involved in what goes into the decision for landlords and what should I price this rental unit at?
Yeah. I don't work directly on the property management side. I haven't in quite a few years. But I do work with tenants looking, and I do get calls for landlords on the listing side, because I do work with listings. We had talked about a landlord that I had received a call from last week. She had been renting her home out to a wonderful tenant for 5 years. The tenant was paying $1,000 a month, great rate for 5 years, and she never raised the rent on her. She really liked the tenant. The landlord was hardly making any money on that home with all of her expenses, but just in the past year, and let me make sure I have the numbers correct, her insurance had gone up over $3,000 in 1 year, which we know this is very common number that we're seeing. Her maintenance on her home went up $1,300 for the pool and the pest control and the lawn service, and then her taxes had gone up as well, and so it was in order to just break even, she was going to have to raise the rent $433 a month. And she was still losing money because the home was going to need some major repairs as it was getting older. The new roof was coming up. And so she was just devastated, thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to raise this rent, $433. So, she went to the tenant and she explained it all to the tenant and laid it out. And the tenant was just absolutely furious with her and told her she was being greedy. And so she called me and she said, I don't have the heart for this anymore. I think I just need to sell the property. And oftentimes in those situations, I just closed on a home the other day where it was a very similar situation. Actually, it was just yesterday we closed. But we start with trying to help the tenant find something where they can move out, because we don't want to necessarily sell the property and then just boot the tenant right away. A lot of the landlords actually care about their tenants. They, have long relationships with them, and it's hurting their hearts to have to raise rents or sell the property because they can't afford to rent it to their tenant anymore. And so it's very painful on both sides.
Well, and one of the things that I'm seeing more and more of now is tenants who have been in there, like you said, long-term, 5, 6, 7 years, in the same. And the landlord legitimately has developed at least a relationship with them, and they like the fact that they pay on time and that they're never late with their rent, and they're good people, and they maintain the property in a good way. And sometimes we have situations where either the landlord or the tenant will come to us and say, well, I would like to buy or I would like to sell to the tenant at that point. And I've expedited several of those where, it can be done. And ask a realtor for help, because honestly, and everybody's got their own pricing strategies and everything else. But the bottom line is our main goal is to get the person who wants to do something with another person that wants to do the same thing,
right,
and meld that together. And we're not going to charge ridiculous amounts to be able to make that happen if you've already decided that's what you want to do. But the difference is you might not have ever written a contract before. And as a tenant, you've dealt with rent and you've dealt with an agreement, basically, but you haven't, scoped out how a sale is put together. So don't for rent by owner, by sale by owner, or whatever, because there are too many people that I've talked to that say, oh, thank God you came in and helped us get through this process, because otherwise we wouldn't have known that they needed an inspection or they needed an appraisal to get their loan, and we had already planned on the money. We'd already taken the money and we'd spent it. Well, it's not done until it's done, and when you get the money wired into your account, then you can spend it. And the same thing for the tenant. Oh, I'm so excited about this. I want this. I want this. Well, the inspection shows that there were behind the wall issues that you weren't even aware of, and now you would rather move out than deal with that on an ongoing basis. So either way, it's important to have the help of your local realtor to be able to make those kind of arrangements.
Because signing the contract's the easy part. It's when there's issues that come up that you want to be protected. For tenants, when they move in, I help them protect their security deposit by teaching them how to do a proper walkthrough. I explain to them how much notice they have to give and make them put it on their calendar. Go over the rules and regulations, because you get those sometimes 80-page leases, and they don't read them. But it's important as a realtor for me to sit down, especially if I have a client that's coming from another state or another country where they're not familiar with it, and really help them understand what the Florida policies are common for landlords to have, what the Florida laws are, what their rights are as a tenant. We as realtors, we're not lawyers, right?
Right.
But we can help them sit down and read, because a lot of these leases, they're in pretty plain English. It's just a matter of getting somebody to read them, and so they understand what their rights are and what their obligations are under the lease, and that prevents so many issues in the long run.
Well, and between us, we've committed 60 years to the real estate business. So I don't think there's any question that I have not heard.
Right.
And so, but people ask sometimes fairly obscure stuff, because when you actually sit down with them and have them read the language, what does this mean? What does this mean? Well, you can always talk to an attorney about it, but this is the standard practice of what this means in real terms. And if you want to, I can recommend a few good attorneys that you can ask them, real estate attorneys. And I would say don't do that. I mean, you have every right to be able to do it, but we're there to be able to explain the basics of how to make the process work, and sometimes the complicated nature of how it works. What happens if I moved in early? What happens if I leave late? What kinds of, how do we protect against if I allow the owner to stay in the property for another week or two, which is sometimes almost has to happen because their moving truck was delayed and they can't get to wherever they're moving to and whatever. Then what do we do? Well, you can set up short-term leasing arrangement where you're paying per day to be able to live in that house, or the owner is paying you to continue to live in the current facility. So there are just all kinds of possibilities. But again, ask your realtor if you have questions about that. One of the things that we're going through now is we're kind of coming out of that 2-year scare period of COVID and moving into a period where if people have gotten their shots and people have worn masks for a couple of years, but there's still COVID going around.
Showings.
What kind of protections do we offer to be able to make sure that people feel safe, especially if they're immunocompromised, they're still concerned about children that have special diseases and so on, about making sure that what they're walking into is not a petri dish?
Well, for me on the rental side, I recommend that the new tenants always have their the new property professionally cleaned and disinfected. And I've done that well before COVID for some very specific reasons. One, because a lot of my clients move internationally or from out of state. And we have different germs over here than they're used to. Their immune system's not quite ready for, a move. I know that, anytime, I've moved quite a bit around, and my kids always get sick in a new area, right? Because their immune system's just not prepared for it. And so that's one thing that I always recommend is, take a day and just have the home professionally disinfected. Now, after COVID, people are really taking me seriously on that, even locals. But even if you don't have a professional come in, take those few hours to really go in and disinfect all the main surfaces. And that's a good practice with or without COVID.
No, you're right. And really what people have kind of had to focus on now is their own personal health. And so, and we're seeing, the other thing that we're seeing a lot of now is 5 years ago, 6 years ago, you didn't have a whole lot of people working from home. You had some, but more now, and that has expanded their opportunity. So instead of having to say, well, I need to be close to Maitland because that's where I work, I want to be close to downtown. Well, maybe you can't afford to be close to downtown or Maitland. Maybe you need to be a little bit further out in the suburbs and so on. Well, in the old days, that meant driving half an hour to an hour, and you didn't want to do that. But now, if you're working from your home computer and your systems are all set up there, you can work from pretty much anywhere. And we're starting to see on the buying side, people coming in from other states who are there basically to work remotely for their company in California or Texas or New York or whatever, and they're given the freedom to live wherever they want because the employer does not care
right.
What house they move into or what condo they're in. Yeah. So they say, well, I could be in whatever. Find me a good school district, that has A-rated schools, and now I can feel comfortable about putting my kids there.
It's changed the way we work because generally people choose location first, and then their wish list is after that. The location. And is the common real estate phrase, right? Because the location's always been the most important when someone's choosing where to live. Well, now they come to us and they say, well, I'm not sure if I want to live in Orlando. I want to live in Jacksonville or Tampa or Arkansas or Texas or Tennessee. And so I've got an agent in all those areas. And I always recommend that they take time to actually spend a weekend, get an Airbnb, and go spend a weekend in each of those areas. And then pick your top two. Go spend a week there. Get an Airbnb and spend a week there.
And drive to the locations that you do want. Even if you're working from home, you might want to be near a place of worship that you're that religion, and so you want to be able to be not cross town from it, or a theme park of note, whichever one is your favorite for your kids, and that kind of thing. So be close to things that there's a Publix on every street corner, so whatever. But I mean, they want to be close to things that make sense for them.
Yeah. If you start by looking at houses, if that's the first thing that you do, whether it's rental or purchasing, it does a few things that confuse the process. First of all, it's too many houses in your brain, but it also gives you the I love that house in Jacksonville. I want it to be in Tennessee, right? And so you start comparing, and it confuses the process. So you do still need to start with location, when you have the opportunity to live anywhere, but start with, figuring out, does it have the things that I need, the places of worship, schools for my kids, whatever that is, and then also spend some time there. And then, start, and connecting with local realtors in the area is great because they can give you recommendations on when when you're in town doing your visits, what to see and how to really experience the area.
And one of the things to remember, too, for those looking to buy or rent, basically, is not to confuse things any more than it is. Personally, I try not to show more than 4 or 5 things at the same time because the human mind starts to mix. It's like, well, was that the home that had the da-da-da-da-da? And it's like, no, that's the one that had this. Oh, wow. So the way of doing it, and I've taught realtors this, but I've also taught home buyers this, look at the end of the house tour. What did you like? What did you not like? And if it's at the top of your list, we might want to make an offer like right now. Does it fit all of the things that you're looking for? If it doesn't, then we probably ought to crumple it up and throw it away.
In your brain, too. Get it out of your brain.
Yeah, well, I physically crumple the paper and throw it in my back seat, and it's like, yeah, that's it. That's no more. And they go, well, we don't want to do that. We might come back to it. Well, my advice to you as a buyer would be, you're not going to come back to it. It's not what you want. So why would you settle for something that you don't want? You're not, just put it out of your mind, out of your thought. The other thing to remember is if you do that at the end of each home and write notes to yourself, you're less likely to say at the end of the tour, okay, which did you like best? Well, I like the family room in that house, and I like the pool in that one, and I like the kitchen in that. If we could put them all together, well, if you could put them all together, you'd be paying $300,000 more. But we're trying to stay within the budget. So, and you mentioned, location, while important, is not the major factor. It's not location. It tends to be price, condition, and location.
Yes.
It still has to be the right location, but sometimes it's third choice. It's kind of like, okay, this is not quite in the location that I wanted, but the price is right where it needs to be, and this home appears to be in the best condition I've ever seen. We wouldn't have to do anything to it. Well, let's wait for the inspector to let you know that. But it's very important to make that consideration because a lot of people who've been, as you mentioned before, renters, don't have to think about maintenance. This refrigerator broke down. What do? Pull out that phone. Landlord, I need you to fix my refrigerator. What do you do now if you're the owner? Well, you call a repair company or you get a new refrigerator. One way or the other, you have to have that. And there are things to think about as far as when you're going through the process. There are warranties that you can buy. And, if you can acquire that, sometimes the seller will just throw that in as something to give you the peace of mind to be able to let you move forward. So those are all considerations because it's a different mindset when you're renting than when you're buying. And you have to be in the mindset that works best, as you said, for you.
And we're still in a market with very limited inventory. And so buyers and renters need to be flexible. So talking about moving a little bit further out than they want to be to get into the price range they want to be in or get the features of a home that they want to have. Those are conversations that as realtors we're having with our clients, for the clients that I have that are moving here that will have a physical office, usually 15 to 30 minutes within their office is a typical response I get on how close they want to be and a drive time. But right now with limited inventory, we're having to ask, can you expand that a little bit? Would that be a major hardship if you had to expand that 10 minutes or 15 minutes?
We have situations where I had one client who was trying to get something over on the coast, and I don't work over on the coast, so I recommended the realtor over there that I work with, and she showed them property for, weekends whenever they could see it. And they were very discouraged because it's like, I didn't realize it was this expensive to be over on the coast. Can we find something closer in? And I said, well, based on what you're looking for on a lake or a river or a body of water, we can get you a retention pond, but we can't get you much more than that. No, we want to get a boat and we want to take a boat out there. So we went to Lake County. We got them into a small place, but they were retirees, and so they didn't care. And 100 feet on Little Lake Harris was not a bad view in the morning as the sun rose over this mammoth lake and with a dock. So it all worked out for them. But sometimes people have to think, I wasn't thinking of Lake County. They weren't thinking of Lake County. Nobody was thinking. So we can work anywhere within the Central Florida region, and we're licensed in the state of Florida. So ask your realtor, if you don't see anything in this specific neighborhood, please expand that search to find something
I'm
more.
Lakeland all the way down to Melbourne, and I've gone to Palm Bay, and I've gone to Ocala.
Yeah, exactly.
But we also have an amazing network of agents that we can always refer to. Our ability to interview and check out an agent on your behalf, we're always happy to do that.
Yeah, and really it's important to remember that it's not about us getting paid. Mm-hmm. It's about serving your need. Yes. And that's what all realtors with a code of ethics behind them are dedicated to doing. So there are 21,000 of us, so ask one rather than trying to go this process on your own. So as we wrap up, I wanted to ask you the last thing. Looking ahead, a lot of people, you've seen headlines out there that say, oh gosh, the prices are going to crash because they've gone up more than 100% over the last 10 years. So is that going to happen the same way that it did in 07, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12? My thought would be, I don't think it's going to happen because that was a completely different set of circumstances that led to it. Mortgages that were given to people who really couldn't qualify for a mortgage, but they did no doc, low doc, so-called liar loan, where you could put a zero on the end of your income and they'd take that to the bank and say, whatever, give them the loan. And then when everybody went through short sales, they were getting nothing back out of it, and it scarred their credit for a while. Now, the thing that's changed seems to be that equity is built up so much that even if prices came down a little bit, you're not going to make $400,000 in equity coming out of it. You might make $380,000. Could you live with that? And in most cases, people go, I'm going to get $380,000? Well, you might get $400,000, but you might get $380,000. So can you handle that? Yeah, we can deal with that. So it's not as big a problem. But what do you see as kind of the next? I know we don't have a crystal ball, but I mean, moving forward.
Mine broke the other day. What do I do?
Moving forward into next year, so that people maybe don't wait until the next major thing that happens and just realize what's in it for me right now is also probably going to be what's in it for me next year and 5 years from now.
We read the news and the media as well and see scary headlines, but I think as realtors, we also have access to a lot of great resources and get into the numbers. And those were presented to us at the trade show. And the numbers, they tell us there's going to be a little bit of a downturn, but not like the news is scaring us about. And so, of course, everyone is speculating. Economists are great at predicting the past.
They don't even know if we're in a recession or not. So I'm not going to rely on all economists.
18 months to officially declare if it was a recession or something like that.
It's too late for
that. So. Right. But the thing is that, if you are in a position where you have to move, you're in the market that you're in. And so the best thing to do is to figure out what is your budget, and then what can you give up if exactly what you want is not in your budget. Do you need to move out a little bit further? Can you look at something that might be in a different neighborhood or might not quite have the amenities that you want? If you wanted something with a pool, could you do something that has a community pool? Look at some of the alternatives that might get you in some of the features that you want in a price range that you want. The inventory problem is not going to go away anytime soon. I have some of the key performance indicators that was provided to me from my 20-year relationship with the apartment association. And they pull their reports from CoStar, which is incredibly respected source, the kind of the gold standard. And we're still seeing 95, 96% occupancy rates. Their absorption rates, are still extremely high as markets come in. Units come on the market. They're being rented very quickly. And so these inventory shortages are going to continue for a while until building catches up, supply shortages catch up. Additionally, as insurance rates, property tax rates, these all affect landlords and developers. And so as they continue to affect those are going to continue to affect rent prices. And so it is the cost of materials that affects rent prices, inflation that affects rent prices. These are hard costs that have to be built in for them to recoup. And so as we see those things go down, then we'll start seeing some ease on the rental side. But I will say that I am starting to see some concessions on the market. On the multifamily side, we're seeing where there might be, half a month's rent free or $300 off a month. And so asking about those specials, as for me, I try and keep up with them so I know what's going on in the market, because that can change someone's move-in costs. It might get affordable for them. And so get in touch with a licensed realtor if you're looking for a place to rent, because they can guide you a lot better than the crazy searching of the internet. And anyone knows it is very, very difficult to search for rentals on the internet in Orlando, and there are a lot of really scary scams out there.
Yeah, and some things where it's not really the landlord that's doing the posting of the rent. There have been some tremendous scams there where they're renting something that they don't own, and it happens to be a vacant place, and they've acquired a key. And,
I had a listing close, and within 3 hours, it was posted on the internet as a rental. And I'm like, wait a second, no, this is
time
not
out.
A rental.
not gonna happen. So basically, from our perspective, I think you will see not an 18 to 20% increase in housing prices. You will start to see that what was used to be a normal rate. 3 to 4%, 5% increase in price. So I would say anybody that's got the money right now to go ahead and buy something should go ahead and do it. Don't be as afraid of prices cratering and somehow losing out, because there are still more people moving to Florida and having children and continuing to expand the population base, and they've all got to live somewhere. So whether it's a rental or an ownership situation, you really do need to realize that today is usually a better day than next year at this time, then the next year at this time, and then the next year at this time. So whatever your needs are, as long as that's not changing, kind of like what you mentioned before, if you're on a one-year contract here, renting makes sense. If you're on a lasting trek through the Central Florida area, and this is your home, and you like to keep it your home, getting locked into a home that you can at least fix the principal and interest is fine. And what happens if rates go down? Well, you can refinance at that point and get a little bit of a break there to put up with some of the insurance and taxes. But I don't see a whole lot of let up to the insurance and tax increases, simply because the values have gone up and the insurance companies are leaving the state. So until the legislature fixes the property insurance mess that we have.
Call your legislators. Visit your legislators,
let's
please.
Empower all of you to call your local legislator and try to do something. They're trying to work on it really for the first time in a while, but it's when you're, as you said, if your insurance goes up by $3,000, who can afford that? That takes a very special niche of individual that can afford that. So it's still going to be, in most cases, a positive thing if you have the money in the bank and reserves. And by the way, the bank will let you know if you have enough to be able to qualify. And that's why it's become a lot safer to borrow now, because even though rates have gone up slightly, still in the fives, you back when I got started, they were 18%. So that's better now. 5%. Oh, that's hideous. It's higher than 3. Yes, but it's better than 8. So,
right.
And if you lock in, you're locked in. So there are all kinds of different ways. We'll have more in future podcasts on the mortgage markets and what can you do to outwit what's going on with the banks and so on. But any final comments that you wanted to get across before we leave our podcast?
I would just say that whatever you are in the process, and even if you're 6 months out from the process, get connected with the local realtor to help guide you in this process, because we really, we're paying attention to the market. This is what we're doing all day, every day. We're using our connections and our resources to be able to share those with you. And like I said, we don't make decisions for you. We don't pressure you to try and go one way or the other. What we're trying to do is just give you the information to help you decide what's best for you. And a lot of times those decisions and that process takes a while. So the sooner you get connected with us, so we can guide you through that process on how to, figure out what's best for you. Sometimes it's talking to a lender, or sometimes it might be, if you have some difficult situations, with your credit, working on those situations, get in touch with us, and we'd be happy to help you out and get you prepared for that. Because oftentimes when you have to move, and this is the market that you're in. So let's mitigate some of these issues together.
Prepare up front, be a Boy Scout, and be prepared at all times.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
It's important. Well, thank you so much. Sarah Hawthorne, our expert in real estate and professional realtor, thanks to you. And thanks to our audience for watching and listening to the Orlando Regional Realtors podcast, which is truly your key to Orlando real estate. Keep tuning into the website and our website, orlandorealtors.com, where you can find future podcasts and sign up for the podcast there, and market statistics, which will give you weekly and monthly updates as to what's going on within our marketplace. And when you start thinking about whether to buy or sell or rent or invest, consult your Orlando Realtor for the best advice on how to move forward. I'm Gary Balanoff. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.